honestly, it's a miracle, the fact that I'm even in front of you guys. And you'll hear that here in a minute with my story. But God is amazing. And if it wasn't for his grace and mercy, I wouldn't be here. And it's I've had over six doctors have said that there is no way that someone could survive the accident I was in. And if you play that over 1,000,000 times, you would never have a survivor. And God not only performed that miracle of giving me life, but all throughout my recovery, he's shown up in a physical way. I have story after story after story where in the midst of being in the hospital, I even had nurses and CNAs praying with me as we're trying to do things like taking out stitches and stuff, or there's complications, and God performing miracles. And I can tell you story after story that would astound you, and it still shocks me to the core. But I'm just going to start kind of from the beginning. So I grew up in Kenai, Alaska. Kenai, Alaska is in the southern part of Alaska, and it's mostly known for the Kenai River, which happens to hold the giant king salmon, where you have salmon that are up to about 70 pounds, I think was the record one that came out of the, or 97 pounds that came out of that river. And I myself, back in 1995, I think it was, I caught a 60-pound female on line and reel. And any avid fishermen out here, that's a fun thing. But that's where I grew up, was Kenai, Alaska. And my parents now, they divorced when I was about 2.5 years old. And I was sent back and forth between them until I was about 6 years old, when they got kind of tired of shifting me back and forth, and they said, well, where do you want to live? Well, I was living with my mother at the time, and I was upset with my mother, and when she called my dad, I said, well, I want to live with my dad, because I'm thinking my mom's rotten. Well, my mom's not rotten. I'm just, at the time, a very troubled child. And so I ended up getting the opportunity, really, to live with my father for quite a long time. So my father, when I came back to live with him, he soon remarried. My stepmother and I had a lot of arguments all the time, and it brought the wrath of my father down on me. Now, there was a lot of yelling and arguing, which was a daily event for me. I often actually cried myself to sleep, asking God, why? What did I do wrong? I'm 8 years old. In my mind, I'm thinking, I don't deserve this. And it's something I never got an answer, obviously, but it was a regular occurrence. My father and mother were upstairs yelling at each other, and I would go to sleep hugging my teddy bear, just wishing this would all end. The good thing, I was introduced to religion from birth, and I say religion because I was in a very legalistic congregation where, it was all about works more than anything. And I attended Christian schools all the way up to high school, actually. And unfortunately, my early life was wrought with a lot of verbal abuse and feelings that no matter what, I was not good enough. And no matter what I did and how hard I did it, it was never going to be right. That's where I got in a mindset that I still struggle with today, called performance-based perfectionism. And I can never do things right in my own eyes at times. It's only through God that I get help with that, and that is a daily struggle that I do continue to work on. But during that period of my life, it's hard to say, but my best friend and I used to talk to each other about all the verbal and physical abuse we both endured from our dads. These conversations got very dark, and we actually fantasized about killing our fathers, not knowing any other way out. And it was a very dark time in my life. When I was around 8 years old, I was able to attend an event hosted by a gentleman named Dave Reaver. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of him, but he was a Vietnam veteran that went to throw a phosphorus grenade in it exploded. And it burned his body and made him unrecognizable. And the fact that he survived that and everything he went through with that, he's a walking miracle. He was the public speaker for this event, and after his recovery, he did a lot of public speaking, and more specifically, promoting God and the fact that God's the only reason he's here. And so I went to that event, and at the end of it, he actually had an altar call. I had a very strong tugging at my heart, and I walked up to the altar call with several other youth and gave my heart right then and there to Jesus. And it was at that moment that I knew, no matter what, beyond a shadow of a doubt, doesn't matter what happens, I'm going to heaven. And in the midst of all the hell I went back to, right after that, I knew that no matter what, I got this guy, Jesus, that I've been learning about, that is going to get me through all of this no matter what. Now, I was baptized a short time later. This baptism that you guys witnessed for me was my rededication of my life back to God. But I was baptized shortly after I accepted Christ when I was about 8 years old. But it wasn't truly until I was a teenager that I really started to have a real zeal for Christ and just absolutely wanted to know everything about him, even though I grew up in the church environment. You know, the little felt boards that you learned about Noah and Noah's Ark and all that. They put up little felt pieces, and you learn about all the different stories. That's how I grew up. But it wasn't until my teenager time that I truly, really wanted to have a strong relationship with Jesus and learn more about him. Excuse me. So it was so strong that I was one of 3 youth leaders at my church. They decided to have the youth led by the young adults, and I was 18 at the time, and I would lead worship with the youth on my guitar, and after worship, myself or one of the 2 other youth leaders would do a self-prepared lesson that we would do. And I mean, I was full board, sold out for Jesus and wanting to bring souls to his kingdom. Ironically, I don't know what to say ironically, I think this is kind of something that happens a lot, but give me 1 second here. Brain kind of hit a wall. One of the biggest problems usually comes with Satan when you're most zealous for Jesus and you press in the most. That's when Satan says, oh, no, And that's when a lot of things come at you. And at this point in time, I was 18, and I ended up having my first girlfriend. She was same age as me, but was in the youth group as well. And the more time we spent together, the more lustful my thoughts became. And the more I started feeling like a hypocrite, how I could be doing things behind closed doors and then go on Sunday and stand up in front of youth and preach to them and teach them, and yet behind closed doors I'm not doing what I'm asking them to do. And I call it, talking the talk, but not walking the walk. And that convicted me hardcore. I felt just rotten, disgusting, and an absolute hypocrite. And unfortunately, instead of going to God for that and asking for help and repentance, I turned my back. And I resigned from being a youth leader, and I walked away from the church right then in that moment. And again, I felt like a dirty, unlovable, unwanted human being. Now, unfortunately, this is where it really went downhill. I spent the next several years filling that hole that I had inside my heart. It was either girls, it was drugs, it was alcohol, something as stupid as movies and video games. Anything to kind of just try to plug that hole that just kept being empty. And I can tell you, nothing fills that hole except for Jesus. I have no doubt in my mind. But at the time, I wasn't there. I really had a problem because I tried to pretend to be what I thought everybody wanted me to be. Um, I put on a show and put on a mask, and no one knew, except for me, how down and depressed, how dirty and unlovable I really felt I was. I put on a macho kind of facade. And in 2005, I joined the Marine Corps. The main reason because I wanted to serve my country, but the secondary reason, and it was a big one, was because I wanted everybody to think of me as the tough guy, because I knew I was a pathetic person. And not in the sight of God, but in my own heart, I felt like I was a pathetic person. I was constantly reminding myself of my inadequacies. And you guys have heard the term, being your own worst enemy. I was absolutely my own worst enemy in those times. Now, in 2007 and 2009, I deployed to Iraq as a Marine. My first deployment, I lived in constant fear. I turned to cigarettes to try to mask those feelings. I smoked a little bit prior to that, but it was to the point where I was lighting my cigarettes with the embers from my last smoldering cigarette. And I would do that all day and all night long. And I did that for an entire deployment for 7 months. And it was so bad that when I came home, I was so sick and tired of everything going on that I told myself, I've got to quit. And I quit smoking cigarettes cold turkey just because I was so disgusted with how much I abused it during my time in Iraq. And cigarettes, unfortunately, do block some emotions. And they do give you that feel-good feeling to mask what's really going on. But God was with me without me even knowing it and helped me quit that. Now, back in that time period, I would do absolutely anything to deaden the feelings and the thoughts in my head. Unfortunately, when I returned from my deployment, my best friend died. He was killed by another Marine within a month from me coming back. And that destroyed me. And I started wishing for death. One of the hardest things for me is this is my best friend who, when I was homeless for a while, his father and him took me in. I slept on their couch. We both joined the Marines. We were going to do it together, but I postponed for a little bit, but then I did join, and I've never had someone that I've opened up to on a real personal heart level. That was the first person I'd ever done that to, and now God took him. That's what I thought. This is God's fault. Why'd God let this happen? The hard thing is when we joined the Marine Corps, his father told both of us, please don't join. You're going to get killed. And lo and behold, his son dies. And so I'm certain in my head, my second deployment, I'm going to eat a bullet. Just knew it. I knew I was going to die. I knew Al-Qaeda was going to get me either with an IED or a bullet. In that entire deployment, I just asked God, make it quick. And I had no life in me. I had given up at that point. When I got back from Iraq, I may have physically survived, but mentally, I was dead. I was destroyed. And while in the Marine Corps, I turned to alcohol to try to block those feelings, those emotions, all those memories that I didn't want to have. I actually finally sought help because I thought about the fact that one Sunday I was sitting in my bathtub, already with a fifth of liquor down my belly, and I had a bottle of rum floating in the bathtub with me, drinking it. I told myself, you got a problem, bud. You got to get help. Unfortunately, as I was seeking help, I wasn't doing it for the right reasons. I was just doing what I thought everybody thought I should be doing. And I still had my mask, my facade. That all came to a screeching halt, literally, on August 1st of this last year, 2020. I was on my motorcycle, and I was riding out in the Applegate Valley in southern Oregon. Absolutely beautiful country. I was involved in a head-on collision with an SUV. I had a $1,500 motorcycle helmet, very high-end helmet. I had two-ply Carhartt pants on. I had a reinforced motorcycle jacket. My helmet was high-vis helmet. I had high-visibility gloves. I had steel-toed boots. Had the gear to be seen and also to protect me. The extent of the accident was to the point where none of those items made a difference whatsoever. I suffered over 16 broken bones, severe third-degree burns across my stomach, 4 inches in height, and across my entire stomach was burned, and it was necrotic down all the way to the fat layer below. They had to excise all that and told me before I went into surgery, we're going to be taking skin from your legs to be able to build that gap. 4 inches is a pretty big chunk of skin. I came out of that surgery, and they said they don't know how, but they were able to cut out all 4 layers and sew me back without having to do any skin graft whatsoever. When I had the stitches taken out, I was told by the by the nurse and the nurse practitioner that they'd never seen any stitches ever that tight nor tied in that fashion. It's another miracle of God's hand in my recovery. Now, these burns was because my bike caught fire. I don't know if you guys have ever heard about motorcycle accidents. They don't catch fire. That doesn't happen. That's movies. Even car wrecks, they don't very typically catch fire. Mine did catch fire, and the responding medics actually described this scene as the most chaotic scene they'd ever been to in their lives. There was 4 helicopters in the air. 3 helicopters were trying to extinguish the fire. My bike caused a 5-acre fire, and they were trying to extinguish that while the 4th helicopter landed and was trying to work on me while I was on the ground. And they actually had the water sloshing in the buckets from the other helicopters landing on top of me and those paramedics as they were trying to do life-sustaining stuff for me, get me in the helicopter and fly me to the emergency room. What they did not know at the time, my worst injury, I had a ruptured aorta. That in itself, I should not be standing here. I should have bled and died on the scene within minutes. And God wanted me here. That's all I know. God wanted me here. But it was a very, very traumatic accident. Like I said before, you don't survive this kind of accident. This is the stuff that family reads about in the newspaper, or they turn on the TV and they read about their kid getting killed. Now, I was hospitalized for 2 months. Somewhere in the beginning of the hospitalization, my father and I reconciled in the sense that I say we weren't speaking for 5 years up to that point. I had a lot of baggage that I carried and unforgiveness. And the last time we met, I told myself, I don't have my father. I don't have a dad. That's not a dad. And in my heart, I knew I was okay with that. I don't need a dad. I say I was okay with that. I wasn't okay with that. That's a lie. But I told myself I was okay with that. I knew if you would have taken me the day before that accident, asked me for $1 billion, if I thought I'd ever speak to my father again, I'd have taken that bet and lost $1 billion. I'd have bet my own life that I would never have a relationship with my father again. That's how hardened my heart was. And yet, when I was hospitalized, I apparently asked for my father to call me. And we started speaking, and it was as if nothing had ever happened. Water under the bridge. And it's been like that since. God washed away all the hardened heart that was in all the memories and stuff that I was holding on to. I just gave up. And it was as if nothing had ever gone wrong between us, and it was like we had a restored relationship without any effort. And that's God. I mean, 100%. since my accident, I rededicated my life to God. You guys witnessed that as I was baptized. I felt in my heart I didn't need to be baptized because I'd already accepted Jesus as a child and been baptized. But I had it on my heart that there's one, you can rededicate yourself to God in your own heart, in the pew, so to speak. But really, the power comes when you stand up publicly and profess that. And so that is why I asked to be baptized again, because I wanted to publicly show that I was giving my life back to God. Daily, I actually seek relationship with my Father, and that's my Father God. I go to him in prayer, and I go to him through the scriptures. And I feel like I'm back being that young teenager that had a zeal for God, and I can't get enough. And the more and more I draw in and ask for more, he gives it to me. And I just feel like a little baby chick that has their mouth wide open and always is hungry. And God just keeps feeding me and keeps feeding me. Now, with that, I willingly share this story, not just to y'all, but I share this story to anyone I can actually talk to. It's a story for me of redemption from fire, both figuratively and physically. What I haven't said is the people behind me saw me flying through the air. I landed in the ditch next to my bike within about a foot while it's on fire, burning me. The two people that came behind on the scene that witnessed me flying through the air try to decide if they should pull me away from the bike because you don't move people, in an accident. Thank the Lord they did, and I think God prompted their hearts because they pulled me away. 30 seconds later, the bike exploded in a ball of fire, and that's what caused that 5-acre fire. I went back with my father about 5 months after the accident. We started going through the debris and stuff on the side of the road. We actually found my glove, my motorcycle glove. There's a video right after the accident, about 2 minutes after the accident happened. Someone started videotaping me. In that video, you see both my hands fully gloved. When my dad and I went back, we found one of my gloves completely burned except for the top part of the glove. In my heart, I believe that on impact, when the bumper hit my hip, my front tire hit his headlight, I believe God sent a battalion of angels and put them in between me and that car. And I believe that for the second on impact, Jesus took in my body because I would not be here on my own accord. If it weren't for God's grace, I wouldn't be here today. That's not counting my motorcycle accident. That's obvious. But without my motorcycle accident even being involved, I would not be alive. I know that for a fact. I drowned my problems away with alcohol, briefly turned to drugs, trying to get whatever I could to get the thoughts of Iraq out of my head. Without God's hand in my life, I'd be dead, or I'd be a delusional homeless veteran jonesing for my next fix. Without God, I truly am a pathetic has-been with nothing to offer. With God, I'm part of his royalty with everything to offer through him. And that in itself astounds me, how amazing God is, how his grace is so abounding, and he's so merciful. I spent nearly 20 years running from God. I became a drunkard and a womanizer. I walked away from a fiancée and her children who became my own. I closed my heart to any relationship with my father, and I locked the door on God. I served my country as a Marine. I was decorated with several medals, but I was still a miserable, lonely human being. And I blamed God for all my problems. It took a horrific accident for Jesus to grab my attention, because that's how hard-headed I am, and God's loving grace and mercy to draw me back into his arms. Since then, my relationship with my stepmother has been restored. I have a great relationship with my father, and I have a better relationship with my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Now, amidst all of the negatives in my early life, amidst all the abuse and all the anger, I'm thankful for one common theme. My mother, my father, and my stepmother, they did the best they could with the struggles that they were dealing with in life. But the most important thing is they shared God with me. Now, as I close, I only ask you to remember one thing. No matter how often or how badly you fall, God will always be there to pick you up, dust you off, and love you through all of it. Thank you for letting me share, you guys. I really appreciate it.